Hello, hello. We will get started at the 1/2 past. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining. I hope you've had a great day. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you would like. It will also help me make sure that the chat functioning is working and that participants can communicate via the chat. Great to see you all. Welcome. We'll wait just a few more moments as folks are joining in at the end of a day. There's so many millions of things that we're doing. You can settle in. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Okay, we will get started. Fantastic to see you. I am joining you today from Austin, Texas, which is not where I am usually located, but it's really fun to be joining you all from the city. It is a great city for those that have not had a chance to make it. My name is Kristen Hunter Thompson. I support Tuva with their professional learning offerings, and I'm super excited to be talking to you all today and working with you all today about how we can help our students practice a range of high school biology skills using Tuva's collection. So a little bit of a sense of where we are going over this next hour together as we will be working together. I should say we are in a webinar format, but we are going to be doing things and participating because that's the way that I roll. And I think that that's what makes more fun for an hour at the end of our long days. So want to kind of give you a sense of who I am and where Tuva's coming at from this perspective, and then we're going to jump right into looking at some biology data and thinking about this interplay between using real world data to help teach our biology content and provide those opportunities for our students to build those science practice skills as they are doing all of those things in one space. We'll then think about how we can leverage data and specifically this collection that Tuva has put together for high school biology teachers and courses, as well as there are other biology resources in the Tuva library of offerings. And then think about so what could this mean for your classroom? There are a lot of similarities. It's what brought us together today in this webinar, but there are also differences of where we teach. And I don't know about you all, but my first period was different than my third period. So like even in the same building, in the same school, and same district, there were differences among my learners, which totally makes sense. So thinking about kind of what it will look like for each of us individually as we go forward, and then wrapping up. So as I have mentioned a couple of times, Tuva has a high school biology collection. And just like before we jump too far in, I just want to kind of give us a sense, a scope of where it is. So when you log into Tuva, you land on the dashboard. Your dashboard will not look exactly like this because your classes will be different than the ones that I am showing you here, but the orientation and the layout will look the same. The way that you can find the collection that we're going to be diving into a little bit further is if you click on our content library, just like go into a library of books, you can come in and you can find different content, different resources through our content library, and you can dive in through the science library, which is traditionally how I've always gone in and found materials. But recently, Tuva's really been building out these collections. And this high school biology collection is the one that we are going to be sort of jumping into a little bit further today on this webinar. As some housekeeping, sort of context setting for today's webinar, I'm really going to encourage you to embrace your adult learner hat. We're going to have some activities where you're going to be jumping in and playing with data, and I encourage you to do that. But I know we can never actually take that superhero teacher hat off. So that's okay. We're going to always keep wearing it. It's going to be there. We'll definitely have moments where we're fully leaning into what does this look like for my students and how can I take this back to my classroom. But I'm also hoping that you're going to have some space to just explore and play a little bit for yourself as well. So as we're jumping in and kind of settling into the space of the webinar from all the things that we've been doing throughout the day, I've got a couple questions for us to think about to kind of ground into the work and what we'll be talking about. And I encourage you, or I invite you to pick one or both of these questions to respond to and share out in the chat. So the questions are, what aspects of connecting biology content with science practices, the doing of science, do your students struggle with the most? Or the other question is, what strategies are you using now to make your biology content, make that learning more relevant, authentic, and engaging for your learners? There's an ability for us to share some great practices. Let's celebrate each other's wins here on the chat, or we can also commiserate on oh, this is a struggle that I'm really having with my students. So I'm going to pause for a moment and give you some time. We'll take about 30 seconds or so to kind of think, pick one of these questions, at least one of these questions, and think about, okay, so what comes to mind? Either what struggles are your students having, or what strategies have worked for your students to get them engaged in your biology content. I'm going to stop talking so you can think of me. Ooh, love it. Okay, so Kelly sharing out using storylines is helping our honors level students really struggle making that leap. Oh, yes, from our teacher led or step by step, sort of we are at the lead, to that student directed, student centered leading. Kelly, I hear you. Yeah, my students struggle with that as well. Leanne is saying using actual data from the data nuggets. Woohoo, using actual data, fantastic. And relating to that real world question. Students struggle with being able to read all parts of the graphs. Oh yeah, I hear you on that one. And telling the story from data. Absolutely, 100%. So I'm in Austin right now because I'm at South by Southwest CDU, the conference, and the last session I was in was all about storytelling and how we can help our students build more skills when it comes to storytelling. So I hear you, and that's, a lot of us are working on that. And we're going to explore some of these ways, some different ways that we can get more of that real world data, that are showing up in the data nuggets, and thinking about kind of how we can step our students a little bit more into that driver's seat, get them a little bit more in driving their learning and engaging it as they're looking through those different parts of the graphs. So what we're working on here at Tuva is trying to create spaces to help you all where you've got the content that we need to teach. And those of us in NGSS states, we need to teach it in this three-dimensional way. Those of us in non-NGSS states, we still need to teach it from multiple components. It's not just fact regurgitation that we are trying to get our students to understand. We're trying to get them to deeply understand what is going on with the information. And as science teachers, there are two components of what we are forever asked to do as part of our jobs, just a couple things. We are to, one, teach our learners everything that is already known about how the natural world works and how we have gone about learning that information over the past many centuries and millennia, and how we will continue to learn information. So, like how to ask questions and what questions are still unanswered. That is a lot that we carry in our profession to do both of those things for our learners. And at Tuva, we feel really strongly that the data is what we actually use in science that has informed all of that learning and understanding. And so we are trying to create those spaces so that students can dive into that data. And because we know that we want our students to be better at answering questions with empirical evidence, basing their reasoning off of recognizing patterns, and making accurate measurements and observations from the data. So you guys are all here, you know a bit about Tuva, right? We're a supplemental curriculum. We are trying to use a user interface that is easy to understand, easier, maybe I should say easier than some of the platforms out there on how to explore and tinker and drive that learning to the student's interest of what am I curious in? Let me try something in ways that are not cumbersome to produce and in ways that the students can't break the system, to really trying to increase that engagement, to get them making decisions of what might happen as we get them exposed to different graph types and practicing their data analysis and interpretation skills. Okay, enough of me talking context setting. Let's jump in and do an activity. So we are going to come from the perspective of, we're going to think about genes. I had to pick one. There's so much amazing content in biology. I'm a little bit biased as a biology teacher, but you know. So the question that I picked for us to kind of ground together to have a shared experience is, how are genes and proteins expressed in tissues? Are they similar? Are they different? Right? So this is getting at helping kids start to explore variation and distribution of expressed genes, things like that. Very often when I was teaching this, it was like, you know, it's just sort of a static table, or it was prose, or I had like slides that I would show my students. But we're going to look at this from a slightly different perspective. We've got a data set that we're going to look at. It's a small data set. And we're going to think about kind of, can we use any data in this data set that I'm going to share with you to get at this question of how are genes and proteins expressed in tissues? How are they similar? Are they different? If the answer is yes, if you do think you can use some of these data, then determine which attributes, or as I had always called them in science, variables, but in Tuva we call them attributes, that you would use. And then what kind of graph would you make of these data, of these variables or attributes? What kind of graph would you use? Would it be a pie chart? Now, here's what I want to say. It's just a concept graph. Do not need to plot numbers. You do not need to set the axis scales. It's just a like, well, I think it's going to be a pie chart, and this would be category A, and this would be, I can't write and talk at the same time, category B. Okay, so just conceptually, kind of what would we kind of do with it? Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense of what we're trying to do. Our driving question is, how are genes and proteins expressed in tissue? How are they similar or different? And here are the data. Oh, sorry. Here are the data that we are going to use. So step one, can you actually use any of these data to get at these questions? And then step two, which of these data might you use and what kind of visualization would you use? So I'm going to give us each a minute to kind of think about this, draw out, you know, what our conceptual graph might look like, and then we're going to dive in a little bit further. Okay, awesome. Not a ton of time, but to look at, 24 rows of data to get a sense. Curious if anybody wants to share out in the chat, what were you thinking? Could we use some of these data to explore these questions? What kind of graph type, which of these data, which attributes might you think about using? What kind of graph types were you thinking about using? It always takes a little bit of time to like type in. One of the exciting things to me about this data set are the different tissue styles and seeing kids' eyes sort of pop when they think about like tongue tissue, things like that. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to kind of think about this. So one thing that I will say is that this is not the kind of data table that I would necessarily just drop to my students and be like, look at these, put it up on my board and say, look at these data, what can you see in these data? Because there's a lot going on here. Although we only have 3 attributes, gene name, protein function, and tissue, and although it's only 24 rows of data, this is still a lot of information to make sense of cognitively for us. So we've got, 4 different tissue types. We've got 2 different protein functions. So that's 2 different categorical variables that we can be looking at. And then we've got the different gene names that are either all letters or letters and numbers, and sort of where do we come at with that? Awesome, Kelly, I love it. Pie charts by tissue type. Excellent. So let's jump in and make a pie chart by tissue type. So we've got our tissue type, and we're gonna make a pie chart. Gotta take that tissue type off, sorry. We've got our pie chart of what's happening here. So we get an interesting example of sort of what's going on by tissue type that we have. As the students, this was pulled from one of the activities where the students are able to go through. I just love the name of this activity, to express or not to express. I don't think any of the kids really appreciate it, but I think it's a greatly named activity. Just to review quickly, in case this is a screen that is new for you, for each of our activities, when you're signed in through your teacher account, you will see, when you land on the activity, you'll be taken here to this page where you can see the teacher overview, and which gives a sense of all the different ways that the activity has been tagged, the learning objective of the designer of the activity, what they were intending, what the students will be working on. And then if you want, you can step through the whole activity here. I find this doesn't really work for me. So what I do instead is I try it as a student. And I jump into looking at as a student. Again, as we are, sorry, I just have to move the screens around so that I can look at it. Again, even when you're trying it as a student, we've got a queue up for you of like, this learning page, this learning objectives page is not seen by your students. It is for teachers only. Only teachers will see that. One thing I do want to point out is that if the text size isn't working, you can adjust that, and it's the same for your students as well. And so that's one of the accessibility features that's built into Tuva. So we can dive in, and through this activity, they get the introduction of what's going on. You guys can explore this activity if you would like. Here, let me put the direct link to this activity in the Zoom chat for you all. But what I really like is that there's different ways to look at it. So we were thinking, or Kelly was thinking, let's use a pie chart. That's awesome. Love it. This activity suggests using a dot plot and getting at, it's going to take me just a quick second to get it to where we want it to be, looking at tissue along the x-axis. Same thing, it's actually getting at, like, do the 4 tissues express the same number of genes? Which we could see really easily from that pie chart. And this is one of the things that I love about Tuva and using data in this capacity, because is the pie chart correct? Is the dot plot correct? The answer is they both are. They both can help us make sense of it. So in our activities, we provide instructions to guide the students, but there's always opportunity for you to jump in and sort of redirect, or for students to make different choices. Now, I do know that the more directed the instructions are, the less the students deviate from it. And we're going to return to that towards the end of the webinar, where I can show you how you can sort of add a little bit of your own flair into these activities if you're interested in that. And so we can step through. It gives hints to the students on sort of how to explore, how to look at it. We can easily filter things in and out. There goes everything. Or we can just look at, eye versus stomach, different things like that. But again, what I love in terms of helping students dive into the content, but using the data in this interactive way, is that they get to be clicking and making decisions and seeing in real time, oh, well, let's just filter out a couple tissues. How does that change things? Let's add them back in. Let's make different adjustments as we go. And that is a way for them to construct their understanding and their knowledge around the biology content, but in an interactive way that can sometimes be more engaging, especially if we are going back and reviewing some content that they maybe learned in the fall quarter marking period, and we need to review it ahead of a final exam, if that's what you do in your course, or a state test if your students are state testing this coming spring, different things like that. So it's great for review. It's also great right out of the gate of getting them into the content area. So this is we're not going to fully go through this activity, but I encourage you to check it out if you've got genes coming up in your curriculum and that unit works well for you. But getting at this there's multiple ways that we can get our students working with data. Very often we have them looking at a graph or looking at just a table. Sorry, I'm going back and forth, not to make you dizzy. Just looking at a table of data. But how can we think a little bit differently, think a little bit outside of the box of, rather than just looking at this in a table, can we make a two-way table? Can we, let's put all of our tissues back in here. And then we can look at the gene name of them, if we want to look up specific genes, and we could look at what their function is. So in essence, what we have recreated here by putting tissue on the X, gene name on the Y, and color coded by protein function is just a different way to visualize this information. And how can we kind of leverage that different way? The same way that we do bicep curls and we do pull-ups and we do push-ups to strengthen our muscles, how can we create those multiple opportunities for our learners to be looking at data and looking at our content? That's what we're getting at here with building out the tools and features at Tuva. So we're going to jump in a little bit further, and I want you guys to explore some of the other, encourage you, invite you to explore some of the other activities within this collection to really think about how can we leverage the data for this content review or content learning straight out of the bat. And again, using data comes in all aspects of our science practices, so it's easy for our students to especially think that data is only relevant in analyzing and interpreting data. And it certainly is very relevant in that space, but it is also relevant across all of our other practices when we are working with data, when we are doing science and working with data, from asking our questions to engaging in argument from evidence. And these activities that I have pulled are really focused on having students ask questions before they jump into the data, having them look at the data from multiple different perspectives, cueing them into different parts of the graphs, having them really think about what's the evidence that they see in the visualization that they've created that could, and therefore what claim could they make from it? Based on what they see, what predictions could they make off of it? Now, I also know that all of us do our curriculum in different ways and in different sequences. So I tried to pull a kind of range of different activities that might be good, that might be of interest to you. I encourage you to jump into whichever one seems exciting for you at the moment. I'll pop these in the Zoom chat in just a second, a direct link. So we've got two activities that deal with the AMY gene and amylase in saliva. They're really cool. The students are able to, I'm going to give you kind of an overview of each, and then we're going to play a little bit in these activities. So these two activities, they're diving in, they're looking at gene expression, and they're thinking about sort of for individuals and overall, what generalizations we can make. They're thinking about relationships qualitatively and making a claim in part one. And then in part two of this activity sequence, they then think they build on that qualitative looking at data and categorical data and adding in some quantitative, some numerical data to make comparisons of frequencies and to be looking across and thinking as we're going forward. So those are this AMY1 gene and amylase saliva. So let me drop those direct links into the chat for you if you want to go that route. The next one, if you're sort of queued up about to be teaching about human impacts, we've got wildfires changing in nature, where students are exploring data about wildfires and graphing that data to think about how the number of wildfires is how it relates to the total area burned over time. So we're building out looking at multiple variables over time, seeing some relationships, looking at the patterns. What's the pattern over the whole time series, over smaller time series, and getting them to think out as like, so what would that mean for the ecosystem? What would that mean going forward for humans? What kinds of things that we should do? So if you're interested in exploring some human impacts, there's the link to that one. And then finally, if you're kind of getting into queuing up for cycles of energy or matter, I pulled a really fun one, which is seasonality of ocean carbon, where the students are thinking about how the amount of carbon in our ocean varies with seasons, which is not something that I often think about. But it can be really fun to explore and offers a lot of aha moments that connects a lot of different things. So if you've talked about photosynthesis and respiration, this is a really fun way to kind of connect those in together in a way that your students probably will not expect or anticipate coming at them. So this one is here. Now, I also know I've only pulled 3. And so that might not actually get any of the things that you're about to teach in your content area. So if you go through the content library to find this high school biology collection, I have pulled examples from 3 of these sections, but there are more sections. Also within each section, there are quite a few activities. I just didn't want to send every activity your way. So that's why I pulled out a couple that really were focusing on this, asking questions, looking at different graph types, getting a sense of what are the evidence in the data after the students have created them, and then what does that mean? How can we make predictions off of it? How would it relate? Sort of that beginning to end component. Some of our activities jump straight into like, let's just analyze and interpret the data. Some are focused on like really leaning into our CER framework. There's lots of different flavors to the activities, but these I selected out of really trying to provide that, helping students really hone those skills across the range, thinking, we're kind of in the middle of the year, getting towards like spring marking period as we go forward. And so how can we get them doing a little bit more, asking a bit more fully of working with the data as we go through. So we're going to take about 6 minutes to explore these individually. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. This is the time where I really encourage you to like put on that adult hat, dive in, explore the data, but always, with that superhero teacher hat in mind of how might this help my students? What might my students struggle with? What might they find really exciting or engaging in these different activities that are up there? With an eye towards sort of what are you being asked to do as it relates to analyzing, interpreting data and beyond? And then how are the data helping you dive deeper into the content area? So that's our superhero teacher hat lens that we are taking into this. though I encourage you to play with that adult hat too for a little bit. So I've put the activities in the chat. I am here. Feel free to send me a message via the chat if you've got any questions. The question is, what are you being asked to do? So I am asking you to pick one of these activities and to jump in and look at it, try it as a student as you go through it. If this is an activity you haven't explored, ideally you are finding an activity in the collection. I have put forward 4 options that's coming up in your curriculum. But here is this beautiful time to actually explore it and think about, could this be something my students could use? So pick an activity, jump in here, try it as a student, go through the motions and think about, how is this working with your students? Thank you for reiterating the question of the ask of what I'm asking you to do. Okay, wait just a second, Kelly. We can, so yes, so Tuva is set up on a freemium model. And so many of the data sets you will see are premium. But, and I don't actually know. So this by lot island population dynamics, this one is one of our free resources. So let me put that one directly in the chat. So of the collection, given that the majority of the activities in Tuva, activities, data stories, all the instructional materials, I'll explain that in a second, do require a premium membership. The majority of them in the collection are also premium, but I want to point out a few things. So if you are in our content library and you go to the all sciences, the easiest way to do a search, rather than just sort of having to search through and then getting frustrated because what you're finding is actually behind, requires the premium account, is to right up at the top of the content library, click on the free. And I will say, these change over time. And so that is one, I say that, one, to give you the heads up of like, if you are one of those phenomenal teachers that lesson plans like months in advance, and if you do, tell me your secret sauce on how you manage that. But just be mindful of like jumping in the night before to see, kind of make sure one of the activities is still freely available. But I also tell you that they change, because what might be here today might not, perfectly align, but that doesn't mean next week or next month there won't be something that would align with your content area. And so coming into the content library and clicking on free is the quickest way to figure out which activities are that you can access with just the basic account through Tuva. With the basic account, you can also upload 5 of your own data sets, which I'll get to in a moment as another aspect of being able to leverage the Tuva platform to help your students make sense of biology. Great. So Annette is also jumping in to share out that every 2 weeks, Tuva features 6 new activities. So 2 for elementary, 2 for middle school, 2 for high school. And those featured activities are always free while they are featured. And so that's a part of why what is free is constantly changing. We are not trying to make your lives harder. We are actually trying to make it easier to access some of the offerings, some of the resources that we are providing. I know that it can sometimes not feel that way. It can be sort of frustrating. But on the plus side, as I said, if you don't see something today, in 2 weeks, there might be something that is coming up that would be relevant. Yeah, great question. Okay. And I'll keep going with your other question because it's another good one, which is, would students be able to access activities without a membership or only on a trial basis? So I just want to speak to this. When you have a basic account, you have a basic account for forever. So no, there's no trial basis needed. If you are interested in accessing the premium or interest like that, I do believe as a participant of these webinars, it comes with a bit of access. I will have to double check on that and confirm it. But we are talking about, like, you've expressed interest, you're spending an hour of your time. How can we, if you just have a basic account, how can you get a better sense diving into what would be included in that? So what I can do is I will put my email address here in the Zoom chat, and you can send me an email with a request, and I will follow up on how that has panned out to be able to sort of really help you see what is involved. I will say the way that the free activities, free instructional resources are structured are the same as the premium. It's just that there are more data sets available with the premium membership than with the free or basic account. Okay. So that was a lot of me talking during those 6 minutes, but those were some great questions that were coming in. Curious for those that were able to kind of jump in and explore one of the activities, if there were some things that were coming up in terms of what were you being asked to do with with regard to the data moves or the science practices, and or kind of how the data was helping you dive deeper into the content area, and seeing if anybody would like to share out or comment on those. That is what we are always striving to accomplish, that balance here at Tuva of not like, the tool is fun, it's fun to click on things, it's got a whole lot of features packed into it, to be able to explore and change. You saw a couple of them as I was diving through and showcasing you, but we can do some really interesting things of looking at, I'm just going to do some quick sort of demonstrating on the fly here of, so great, we've got, we've plotted our data. Let's get a sense of, how this is looking. Oh, interesting. This is all just high. Let's color it by population. Oh, all European. Interesting. So many interesting things going on with looking at this data. But you've plotted it. Maybe you want to then get a sense of what's actually going on with that relationship, right? We're in high school, so we want our students to, like, not only being able to make a graph through this drag and drop feature, but then go that next step farther and start really building on some of these statistical thinking approaches and some of our statistical analyses of how we make sense of data. So be it you want to plot the least squares line, maybe you don't want that to plot for you, but you want to kind of drag and get a sense of it yourself as to, like, how you would fit the data. And then, sorry, my mouse is being funny, comparing it out with what the actual fit of the data are. We can run a variety of different statistical measures among the data that we are looking at. We can do counts and percentages, and we want to be pushing our learners to not only get a sense of central tendency to be able to explore it, but then also like, what's our standard deviation or what's our variance, but in ways that are accessible to them and are meaningful and connected into the biology content. So as I said, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create that balance of having content rich real world data sets in a platform that's fun to play around with and click and edit and drop and drag and things like this that you can't break. And it's really easy to make different graph types. You can just undo things that you've done previously, to take them off of your graph type in real time. Or if it just gets totally wonkadoo crazy, you can just start all over. You can just reset really differently than if you're working in Google Sheets. But not have it be just like, oh, well, we're going to play and have fun, but have that work with the data be serving their understanding, their deepening comprehension and retention of those biology concepts. That's what we're striving towards when we're working with it. So let's kind of keep moving forward. I will say, as I sort of mentioned, there are so many rich resources that the team, the science content team at Tuva has pulled out for you in this collection. And what I love about that is, so that's the tool side of what we're trying to do with our instructional resources, creating that space for our learners. But from the collection side, for us as the teachers, what I love is like a couple things. One, I don't have to click through the filters to find this information. I can just come here, I just come directly here and look through it based on like kind of section header, what is it that I'm looking for? The other thing that I love is that, again, coming back to this, like if we're trying to review or if we're trying to have the students elaborate on their learning, so we've gone through some of the initial E's in the 5E model, and we want them to apply that learning in different ways, rather than it being on us to have to make up that way, that other way that we're going to have them apply. We can just jump in here and look for a different activity, a different data set, getting at the same biology concept, but with different data, which will help us get a better sense of what's actually going on in their brains. What have they retained? What are they getting tripped up on? Things like that. So as you're using Tuva in your classroom, a couple things to note. So I've mentioned these, like there are activities and there are data stories, and you might have seen sort of this nomenclature popping up in the content library. It's sort of the first thing that pops up on these tiles about the different resources that are available. We have 3 kinds of instructional materials that we make available to our users. So the activities, what we have been focused on here today in this webinar, are designed to take a lesson or two, recognizing that everyone's lesson periods are different number of minutes, but in general, around sort of 45 to 90 minutes. And they are built out to be much more comprehensive. They are helping students understand the content and really diving deeply into the data. And they don't get fully out of performance expectation because there's so many things that can go there, but they're really richly providing a really important puzzle piece in that building up to students being comfortable and confident in that performance expectation. Our data stories, on the other hand, are purposely designed to take about 10 to 15 minutes. They are not everything of the content or all of the data moves that you need to do, but rather instead use content to help students practice an individual practice or data move, data skill. And so they're great for using as do nows or bell ringers, or on Friday afternoon, like after a quiz, or those in between times. They are meant to give kids sort of quick practice, low floor, high ceiling, so that they can build that confidence and their skills with the data move, with those practices. So these are a great thing to dive into and explore and sprinkle into your curriculum as you're going through, as another way to leverage real world data to build that skill. Like we were talking about earlier, they struggle to look at all the different graph types. Awesome. Take 10 minutes and use a data story that's helping them get at that. They struggle identifying evidence. Awesome. Jump into one of our data stories that is sort of in support of building out their CER capabilities. And then we have a bunch of data sets that don't yet have activities or data stories combined with them, or we have data sets that do, and maybe they're not like entirely what you're looking for. More on that to come. The other thing that I want to mention before I jump into that piece is we have two different types of activities. And this came up earlier of they struggle to make that transition from teacher-led to student-driven. And we have purposely designed our activities at Tuva so that we have two kinds of activities. We have our guided activities, which are what I think all of the ones that we've been looking at so far are guided activities where they're wholly or partly guided with instructions, sort of step by step, do this, do that, moving through it. And the intention is when you're learning new content, sometimes you don't want to be totally driving the ship. It's helpful to have some scaffolds. It's helpful to have some supports or bumpers that you can use to work through the material. It is also great for having students do it on their own as homework, or when you're differentiating within your class, you can get a group going on a guided activity, and then you can come back, but they've got those instructional steps built in along the way. But we don't only want our students to be learning in that way, right? We want to open it up so that they can be driving the ship. This was brought up earlier in the webinar. So we have also designed some of our activities, to be more student directed. There are not step-by-step instructions telling them what to drag where and what to filter out, or what kind of graph type to choose, or prompting, the like multiple choice questions where then they're told if they've got the answer correct or not. We want it to be more open-ended. And so we have built out and we continue to build out both of these offerings so that you have that opportunity either in one class period to differentiate among your learners to meet them where they are, or within your lesson sequence of a topic area to start with more guided and work towards more self-directed as you're going through. Now, I will say there are far more guided activities that we have in the app available, and there are more student-centered, student-directed ones that are in the works that are constantly coming. That lopsidedness of proportion is driven largely by sort of what we are asked for and what there is interest in. So there's a lot of guided, but there is also student directed in there. As you've seen, we can use this in entirely remote settings. Thank you, pandemic, to confirm that. Hopefully we will never go back to fully remote learning, though I do appreciate it for professional learning that I got to talk to you all from here in Austin, Texas today. But it is great for one-on-one using the Tuva tool, be it the one-on-one if you're a one-to-one school. What I really highly recommend, where I've seen kids just absolutely flourish, is with sort of taking the partner coding mentality to using Tuva, where you have two students at one computer, and then they need to engage in that great pedagogy we know of actively communicating to each other. So one is driving the ship with their fingers and one is driving the ship with their words as to what the person with the fingers should be doing on the screen. And they are conversing with one another about different moves and different activities as they are going through. It works hybrid. The system has been built to work in a variety of different ways. Okay, this was the one that I was really excited to get to. So let's say you've got your own data, because we all collect I shouldn't say we all. Many of us have our students do labs where they're collecting their own data. And you can upload that into Tuva. There are two ways that you can do this. Sorry, I just get so super excited about this feature because it didn't exist when I first started using Tuva, and I love that they have added it in. Okay, so two ways that you can upload your data. If you have a Google Sheet, if you're a Google Classroom, awesome. You can just directly click in and upload from Google Sheet. If you are a Microsoft school and you use 365, great. You can upload from OneDrive straight in from there. If you are neither of those and you don't have in either of those capacities, great. You can upload it from your computer. So we really tried to make it as easy as possible as a way to upload a data set, a spreadsheet file that you already have into the app so that you can then explore your own data within the app. The other thing that I think is really cool and that I really wish I had when I was in the classroom, now I do professional learning, is this insert data feature. And so this is in real time, our students can add their own data. So let's say you are, no, I should not say this. I should say, let's see, we've got deer and wolf numbers. Let's say you're doing a simulation to look at predators and prey. And you're going through the simulation, you're having your students do it and you're counting out. And so in time period one, in year one, there are, sorry, I'm building this on the fly. Always a good thing to do while talking. In year one, there are 40 deer and 4 wolves. And then in year 2, we have 50 deer and 8 wolves. And then there are 60 deer and 10 wolves. And so as they're going through the simulation, you can just directly insert here your data. And what they're able to see, as you can see, as I'm putting the data in, are that the data points they're popping up in real time. Now, are they situated in any place? No, because just like all of the other Tuva data sets, the platform's like, well, I don't know what you're interested in. I don't know what kind of questions you want to ask. And so instead, then we can come over and we can create what we might want to have going on. And we could, sort of be able to look at like, what are our number of deer and what are our number of wolves and how are they changing over time? So as you're building out, as you're going through the lab, rather than the extra step of them writing it in Google Sheets or them writing it on the paper and then needing to type it into Google Sheets and then uploading it, or them writing it on the paper, typing it into Google Sheets, and then trying to figure out like Google Sheets, making a graph from it, you can just directly enter the data here within the Tuva platform. And this, I think, for me would have been a total game changer of how things work. Another thing that I want to point out, which is a brand new feature that Tuva has added, is the ability, okay, it's asking if I want to leave because I haven't saved my data. This was just a demonstration, so I'm not going to save these data. But that's great, right? So like your students can't pop out of it without those data being saved. It will cue you into that. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of data sets. Many of them have activities that exist. Some of them do not. So for the ones that don't, if you find a data set that you're like, this would be fantastic and I would totally want to work on it, I'm just looking through to find a data set to jump into. I'm not finding one immediately. And I'm just going to jump forward because I want to make sure that I capture this in our time. You can create your own activity now within Tuva. So you give it a title, test title, and you give it a description of what's going on. This description the students will see. This learning objective they will not see, but that's really good for you to always capture. And then press next. And that creates the start of, the description was for you. This student introduction is what students will see. So you create any context that you want for the data set that you have, the data set that you're using. And let me just point out, all of our data sets come with, so I'm down here at the bottom, it's kind of small, it's kind of hard to see. But if you click on this about button, which it's not going to let me do because I'm building out an activity in this moment. So let me jump over to a different data set. It's always down here in the bottom. It'll pop up a description of what's going on in the data set. That's a great place to pull from, plus your context that you want students to have. And then you just get to start adding instructions for your students. Question 1, instructions, and then you get to start asking questions. And there's 4 types of questions that you can add in: a multiple answer, multiple choice, where it's just select one versus select all that apply, a long answer or a short answer. And so you have to pick what kind of question you want. So multiple answer, you can type in your question. and then you type in your options, and then you select which is the correct one, so that in your activity, as your students are going through it, they will get that feedback in real time. And I think that this is a great opportunity as you're going through to think about sort of how to, if you've got an activity, if you have an idea, or if it's like the activity that you have just isn't asking the questions that you want, copy and paste and change the questions, build out your own activity. Okay, I'm seeing some great questions come up. Are you able to download your graphs? And that totally rocked it. Yes, you can. Let me show you on how to do that. I'm gonna jump over to the gene expression one to show you in real time. So this little camera icon, this screenshot, will pop up, and then you've got multiple different options on how you can capture it. You can either just copy it, which copies it to your, I don't speak computer, but whatever that thing is, and then you can paste it in something else. You can download it, so you actually get the PNG file, or you can download it as an SVG file if you want to upload it into your learning management system as a web-based program. The create your own activity feature, is it free? That is a great question. And I don't see why it wouldn't be with our free data sets, because it's part of your, it's part of being in the Tuva interface. But again, that's a great question, and I will circle, if you send me an email, Leanne, I put my email in the Zoom chat, I'd be happy to follow up with you on that piece. Sorry, just one quick thing. So I'm here, I've added my questions. Once you've added one question in, then you have the ability to publish. It will constantly save what you have built out as your activity in real time. I'm gonna exit out of here so that I can save and exit. Again, it's cueing you to be like, you're leaving. Make sure you've got something there. So when we're in our data set library, the Tuva data sets, I'm just looking in real time to answer this question. Yep, so this is one of our free data sets, and you can create an activity with it through your basic account. So through the free account, you can access it. How you might find that activity, you might ask. So in the top right-hand corner is your username, and you're going to jump there, and it will have my activities. And that's how you can then go back to find it. If you want to keep building it out, it's in test mode and you want to keep building it forward, or you are, ready to share it out with your classes, with your students. Okay, so those are a few. There's a lot there that our science content team has already created that you can use, but I really wanted to highlight those other features, the other components within Tuva, as ways to be able to leverage the app and the space for your students. So we're almost to time, and I'm going to encourage you as we go forward into our lives to think about kind of what we can do, how we can take this forward. We're not going to pause on this too much, but I do want to express that we've talked a lot about the collection, but also there are other ways that we can get at finding our content. So I highlighted up the content library. This is a great way to jump in. We've got all of our life science, all the NGSS performance expectations outlined, as well as we have them by different science content areas. You can do the search by grade band so that you're focusing in on high school to look for it. Another great way to look for biology content that you might be able to leverage into your curriculum is by coming to our standards page and then jumping in and selecting specific standards that are relevant. We've got a variety of different standards and more state standards we are loading as it's coming forward each day. And so we're trying to provide multiple different avenues to be able to find that content. I do just want to highlight up on the content page. You can, if you're only looking for that activity, remember those are the more comprehensive, designed for 1 or 2 class periods, then you can click off the data stories. So you're only going to be seeing those options as a way to start filtering down what all the options are, and vice versa. If you just want a data story, you're like, I've got 10 minutes, I'm going to have 10 minutes tomorrow. What's a data story I can grab for my students? Great, jump in and just, filter it out, just select down for the data stories to be able to look for it. We try to provide a variety of supports and resources within the app. So both on your dashboard page of along the right hand side. So yours will look different again because you have different classes, but along this right hand side, we try to provide a variety of kind of just in time information to send your way and thinking about how to support you. The help desk is great. So definitely make sure to kind of check that out if you have any questions or if you run into any hiccups in Tuva. So we're trying to provide that support, and you can always email us at support@tuvalabs.com. I thank you so much for everything you do every day for your learners, and thank you for joining us for this hour. It has been great talking to you about different features that Tuva has, different resources, activities, and ways that you can create your own or upload your own data into the app to really leverage real world data as engaging ways to help students build those skills and deepen their understanding of biology. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk with you soon. Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone. Great talking with you.